I wanted to start with Sue because, as we mentioned, your whole organization, Small Cell Forum, tell us a little bit about your organization and how it so beautifully folds into what this panel is about.
Yeah, well, we are all about overcoming the roadblocks to takeoff, right? Just the exact title session. So we're really happy to be here. We're going to talk about some of the roadblocks to get to all of these great new technologies that are coming with 5G and new services. For those not familiar, the Small Cell Forum is a global trade association, and our whole aim is to accelerate the adoption of small cells globally, and by focusing on breaking down both the commercial and technical barriers. So we work with our members, our partners, enterprises, and regulators to break down those barriers.
So that's a great introduction, and we'll go right on to Ulf. Tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, coming from T-Mobile. I mean, this has got to be a very exciting time, but also some concerns about some of the headwinds we face?
Well, right. Thank you, Alisa. And I haven't been with T-Mobile that long. I've been there 3 months. Actually.
Oh, okay.
It's an amazing journey. I used to be the CTO of Ericsson for many, many years, and Chief Strategy Officer of Ericsson for many, many years. And I worked with everything from 1G. I started with 1G some 30 years ago. And here we are at 5G. And I've been working with 5G about 10 years. So for me, the switch over to the operator and carrier side was natural because there is some very big movements going on with 5G. One of the things is that it's less and less only a carrier-dependent industry. It's more, or a supplier-dependent industry. It's more and more up to the carriers what you do with it. And the other thing is happening here in the United States, first in the world. And the significance of that, and we've all watched the launches on TV and all this, and T-Mobile is not only a sponsor of this conference, to set the record straight, we're actually also building the largest and most covering 5G network in the United States. And we're going to launch a full nationwide coverage in the beginning of next year. So with that comes the significance of mobility, which 5G is all about. That's the roadblock you were asking about, Alisa. And the true mobility is what enables new services. And we firmly believe that. And it's been the basis of this industry since 1G to actually provide that true mobility. That's how it all started. It started with cutting the cords on telephones. And it would be kind of bizarre to bring back the cords when we're moving to high-speed broadband or ultra-wideband. It's been labeled in the industry. So that's why we believe so much in the true mobility and covering the whole nation.
And we'll welcome into the conversation here, John, with Cisco. So tell us a little bit, one of the things you mentioned right away when we were talking beforehand is Wi-Fi 6. So I want to give you an opportunity to first talk about that and also how that might help with bringing this to fruition.
Sounds great, yeah. So this is a really exciting time now because, so what happens, we try to build the best enterprise networks and service provider networks to solve our customer problems. And as you know, we have IoT, we have multi-cloud, we have all these things happening. And the combination of 5G and Wi-Fi 6 is basically dramatically changing what we can do in wireless and allowing us to solve many use cases we could never solve before. So 5G is focused on providing really wonderful service with large coverage, especially outdoors and so forth. Indoors, we have really, really dense environments, and when you need huge data rates per square meter, like tens of megabits, hundreds of megabits, or gigabits per square meter, that are the density and possibilities from Wi-Fi 6 can open up many use cases.
So the interchangeability, inside, outside is okay. I wanted to ask you, Sue, we talked a little bit about what needs to occur to bring this technology to bear. And we talked about fiber needs to be laid, small cells need to be occurring on that fiber and towers. Explain, I was only learning recently that with 5G, it needs to be much closer. There's a closer range of where you go versus if I'm using my cell phone, I could be 5 miles away from a transmission point. So maybe let's just talk about that. And then, of course, the logical follow-up question is, wow, that seems really tough to lay down all that fiber. Some of it already exists, but what about that piece of the challenge that represents?
Okay, so at the risk of oversimplification, I know there are some folks that don't have wireless backgrounds. So when we talk about 5G and we talk about densification, my whole objective is to densify these networks, help the operators densify these networks. And the way we're doing that is mainly with small cells. So you have everyone's familiar with the big towers outside, and the original legacy networks were built sort of more for outside in. And so indoor coverage is often a challenge. So now the majority of traffic either originates or terminates indoors. So it's sort of this upside down traffic routing for operators. So it's been a big challenge. So now we conduct market research, and one of the things we've learned is that the big growth in preparation for 5G, but on 4G today, getting some ROI on their current LTE investments, is in the indoor space, then followed by urban. So now a big part of our focus is in the indoor space and how we're going to break down those barriers. So some of those things that need to happen, the latest research really shows us that operators are really needing lower OpEx costs. They need more simplified deployment processes, more plug and play. They need a better ROI case. I mean, that's a big one we've talked about this morning. They also are going to need more simplified processes for approvals. We've moved the needle in a lot of these areas. They're also very risk averse. So they want to share the costs and the risks with other operators perhaps, or with building owners or enterprises or cities, for smart cities, things like that. They need more affordable access to sites, backhaul, spectrum or shared spectrum. They want a deeper integration with Wi-Fi, and of course, lower CapEx costs. So there's a lot of work that we're doing. So this is all great, but we need to break down all of these barriers, and then we'll see a lot more densification happen. If we can break down these barriers globally, we'll see 2 million more small cells in 2025 deployed than we would based on the core forecast. So it's really important. But I think, as we've talked about in the earlier panels, the more important than the site numbers is really the new services and business models it will bring. So I think we also need to get to more of a neutral host multi-operator scenario, which will be the prime model come like 2022, where you...
Let me just interrupt you. Do you guys know what that means? Because okay, yeah, we're in that situation where these guys have all got you, and I couldn't write fast enough when I was talking. I'm like, wait a minute, neutral, multi-host. Okay, so they know, so that's all that matters.
So as an example in here, for those who don't know, if you're a building owner and you want to provide coverage by all of the carriers, you don't want 4 times the radios deployed. So if you have a neutral host situation, you have one set of infrastructure and everybody rides on that. And that's really, really important for us to be able to scale and get to the level of densification that we need for 5G.
It really explains it well. Okay, got you. I'm a little slow, but I'm there now with you.
Okay, great.
We mentioned about return on investment, ROI. What about this idea of monetizing 5G? If you're enterprise, you're looking to monetize 5G, how do you don't really, what the investment is, right? You know what your costs are up front, but how do you know what you're going to be able to make from it?
Right, that's a very good question. And I'd like to go back. There was a quote here, I think it was John's quote, that said, we always overhype technology in the near term, and we always underestimate the impacts of technology long term. The same goes with the ROI cases, I'm afraid. We always overestimate the cost of implementation, and we underestimate the benefits. And for 5G, and I've seen many calculations, it's very hard to see with the kind of discussion that's been going on here all morning with the possibilities of connectivity between cloud and IoT applications way beyond what's available today, with the low latencies that can then potentially get us to where we can apply augmented reality applications, which has such a big promise. It's hard even for us to imagine. I get to see so many different applications that are being developed on that, in everything from universities to small companies and startups. that is just going to change the way we do healthcare or repairs or manufacturing or the way we. So to do business cases on that, I find that really hard. I think, and there was a question put earlier this morning on your first panel, I think, where how do you see this start? And I think, and where does enterprises start to embrace this? It's probably by doing and by looking at what the opportunities are. How do they get the connectivity started? Well, the connectivity is what the carriers are building up now, and you see news of launches every day. I think we're going to see from all the carriers very soon nationwide coverage, and it's going to mean so much for businesses in rural America, for example, or small businesses that has no connectivity of this ability today. So that's going to do the business case. That's going to be the ROI for wherever you are if you're able to jump on the technology wave.
I wanted to ask you, John, we talked about the network slice piece. So can you tell us a little bit about that, the challenges there to end-to-end, and how we overcome that?
Awesome, yeah. So the 5G network slice is a really powerful capability. That's the idea. You can take an actual network and split it into multiple virtual networks. And you can run different applications on these different virtual networks to give them different bandwidths, latencies, security, quality of service, so forth. Now what happens, though, for these enterprise applications, the enterprise wants this end-to-end from their user and device to where the other side is. It could be a telepresence unit, could be another doctor with their mobile device, could be a data center, or so forth. And then what happens is you need this end-to-end to go across as service providers 5G, including the wireless and wired part, as well as the enterprise network. And you want this to be one slice. So then what you need to do is you want to do management across these. And this is something that will take a while to do, but we need it to really succeed. You want to take that network slice in 5G and connect it to the network slice in the enterprise network such that it's one unified slice. You also want to be able to automate it. So if the enterprise wants to add a new device, an IoT device, or so forth, they can do it very quickly and easily. You also want assurance. Is this network slice working the way it should be? Is it providing the desired service? And if not, why not? And how can we solve it? What is the root cause? And then be able to have automatic ways to fix it. So then instead of having somebody complain that there is a problem, you can proactively identify there's a problem and proactively fix it. And that can really turn a lot of these 5G use cases into reality.
That's going to be a piece too, right? That part, all of the problems that we don't even know about yet. You know, that's scary to think of.
Right.
But it's true. And you already have systems to deal with that, I would imagine, as you've rolled out other technologies. Ulf, can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole coverage thing, again, back to that, and to bring this capability in a true mobility is going to be based on 4G, actually, surprisingly enough. But 5G starts with 4G. And we at T-Mobile rolled out the largest coverage 4G network in the US. We have 326 million pop coverage today in our network as it was in the last quarter. On data we have based on, and now comes a little bit technology again, but all this is based on radio frequencies. And the lower the frequencies, the further the reach. So to be able to build 4G in very loads, like typically 700 megahertz or 600 megahertz, is really the story of how you build a tremendous coverage. Mm-hmm. And we've been doing that since some years back. We actually have enhanced the network just over the last quarters on the lower bands to more than 300 million population coverage, 304. So that gives that true connectivity. And then by flip of a switch, the technology is actually such that we can load new software into the network and be 5G capable on this. And just on 600, we have passed 3,500 cities and municipalities that now has in the US 600 coverage. So when we flip a switch, we can make all that into 5G. And that's actually the real reason why I'm wearing this T-shirt here.
Yeah.
We call that 5G for all. And 5G for all means not only 5G in some dense urban cities, as some of the competition has launched already, because that's based on this millimeter wave or what you heard about the short range. people need to go for a treasure hunt when they have bought a 5G phone to find a signal that would actually light up their phone. We want it to be everywhere. And that mobility in itself is going to be a big deal for enterprises, because that's when you can start to truly think of your IoT application. That's when you can think, because 5G was actually built for that. It was built for connecting machines, and we already heard about the critical machine type communication and massive machine type communication, which are those vectors of technology which 5G is built on. In the middle of that is, of course, the enhanced mobile broadband case is where it will start with the smartphones. But very soon we will see the IoT being connected in by 5G.
Talking about IoT, and I wanted to bring in the AI piece. How will 5G benefit? I mean, or maybe talk about the link between artificial intelligence and 5G.
Yeah, so this is a very important topic. What happens is our networks today are incredibly complex. They're really, really complex. They're too hard for a human to actually understand how they work, to understand all the data available quickly.
Wait a minute, is that any human? Too hard for any
human?
Because I don't know about Sue. Maybe she might be able to.
But this is why we're going much more to machine learning and various forms of artificial intelligence. As you know, there have been massive advances in artificial intelligence in recent years. We've actually used it in networking and security for decades, actually. For 20 years, we've been using machine learning to identify threats and stop them. The new things that are happening now are using things such as machine learning to understand how can we optimize a network to provide the reliable coverage, reliability, low latency, and so forth that's needed by adapting all the parameters. And also using machine learning to identify, hey, is the network working the way it should be, or is there a problem? And then do root cause analysis of what that problem is. And to do the root cause analysis, we need things like machine reasoning, which is another subset of artificial intelligence that hasn't gotten that much attention recently, as much as machine learning, but we think it's going to be really, very important for the future. Because with machine reasoning, you can actually figure out this is the root cause of the problem, and this is how I can solve it. And then you can quickly automate that to help the network provide the desired service that's needed to get these IoT applications going.
And I will just comment on that, because machine learning has another implication that is combined with cloud and mobility at the edge and computing at the edge, which was touched on also on an earlier panel. When that is happening, those algorithms that are in machine learning can make decisions which at a haptic approach can be executed on devices and on machines, or on a set of goggles, or as the example of aiding someone who needs aid in terms of not being able to see or something like that. All of those things needs that very reactive network.
Yes.
And that's what 5G does. So 5G adds that to these technology revolutions that are going on with the cloud, machine learning, all those capabilities. But if you also can get a connectivity which is almost instant, that's when the magic happens. That's when you get executable actions for whatever service that the cloud supplies in an enterprise world, in the enterprise world. So that's why it's so important.
We, in Small Cell Forum, we're actually working on a paper right now where we're looking at how we can use ML and AI in the network planning process. So stay tuned for that. I believe the publication date is going to be in September timeframe. So we're doing that jointly with 5G Americas. So that's what we talked about in January. So
good thing.
Interesting one. Yeah, because it's critically important. Small cell placement, for instance. We need so many small cells deployed, so it's really, really important that strategic placement happens in the network.
And we're building now in the major cities, so yeah, it's a big thing with
really
zoning
important.
and to be able to get it in.
What about that piece, the zoning piece, and how you mentioned kind of how wonderful it would be to have a standardized process to go about this? Maybe, are there any efforts being made to overcome that challenge? Or, I mean, kind of maybe articulate for us what exactly folks are dealing with and what can and should be done.
Oh my gosh, this one's just too hard to even tackle. We're all working on it. Every organization's working on it. We do a lot of work around the globe, but even when you just look at the US, you have the federal government level, you have the state level, then you have local municipalities, and everybody has different expectations and different rules. So as an example of some of the work we do, we worked with 5G Americas that both Cisco and T-Mobile are a part of. And we've written some papers on small cell siting, both from a regulatory and technical perspective, small cell siting and aesthetics, making some recommendations around what aesthetics should be. We've moved the needle a little bit there in terms of getting a shot clock established for approvals for applications. So the municipalities are getting bombarded with applications now for new small cells. And it's a big education piece that this isn't a big cell tower. This is more the size of a Wi-Fi modem. And so it shouldn't have the same rules and taxation and approvals required for a big tower. So we're doing work there. We just responded along with the GSMA. The European Commission's, their communications committee, is looking to establish regulatory rules for small cells and densification of the network. So they were looking for input across the industry, and so we've provided input based on what a small cell should be. And so if you can kind of categorize it, if it's shaped like this and the volume is so many liters and the RF emissions is, if you can put it in boxes, maybe they can sort of check a box and say, okay, we've seen this before. So we can't scale the networks when we don't have repeatable deployment processes. They need to be repeatable, scalable deployment processes, and that's a real challenge.
I'm curious if there's a national piece to this. We talked a little bit about China, and they don't have this multitude of agencies to which they have to apply to deploy this technology. Are we at something of a disadvantage as far as that's concerned? I mean, maybe it's not just a barrier to overcome. Maybe it is the biggest piece.
Well, in that regard, I would say yes and no. When we look at the forecasts and the numbers that are being deployed, North America and China are leading the way. And that is because we are more progressive in these areas of having a more positive regulatory environment. Granted, the US is much more difficult than China, but we are moving the needle. But we have a big, long list of barriers and a big, long work plan, and we need more help. So anyone interested in getting involved to help us break these down,
We'll meet back.
reach out to me.
I'm an optimist, though. I think it's well recognized by the federal government that this is a problem, and I think there is many positive movements going on. Also on the regional level, in cities and municipalities, people are starting to understand that 5G is not only a way for a carrier to make money on providing mobile subscriptions. It's becoming a mission-critical infrastructure for the growth of the nation.
The whole country.
Yeah, for the whole country. So CTIA just recently published a report where they said that 3 million jobs will be created by 5G, which is that's a huge number, right? That's 1 in every 100 persons will be working with 5G in some way or another. And they said that was $275 billion of direct investments. That's from the carrier side and from the industry side. And then it will create about $500 billion of economic growth to the nation by 2024. China, that you mentioned, is investing around $400 billion in their 5G effort, which is a huge effort. All operators in China are owned by the government. So that's a different story, right? So the applications become easier if you're owned by the government. But
Own and approve.
Yeah. But the approach here is much more of showing the benefits. So the industry has to show the benefits. I think we're on a good way of showing the benefits. I think we're getting a positive response. It's even we're going down in very tough areas, discussing could we put up small cells, could we apply for this, and then showing the benefits. That's really what it's about, and then the approvals will come, I think. But that's how it is.
And it's important to show that the municipalities can monetize this as well.
Yeah, they can make money from it. John, I'm curious what you think about it.
Yeah, I'm also optimistic about this. And what you keep in mind, there's some places we can actually do these sort of capabilities quickly. Indoors, with things like Wi-Fi 6 and small cells, we can roll that out very quickly. In addition, the FCC is looking right now to open up the 6 gigahertz band for unlicensed, and that can lead to humongous innovation because we can build many applications there and without other let's say, older Wi-Fi devices interfering. So there's a variety of different efforts currently underway, which I think is going to revolutionize the wireless.
And a good comment there, I wanted to make that also, is that because you mentioned before the coexistence with standards like Wi-Fi 6 and so on. Actually, the core network of 5G, the one that we will build out as a core, the one that is the kind of backbone that connects it into every enterprise cloud out there, that core network is identifying Wi-Fi as one direct connection and the 5G air interface as the other. So it is in the standardization already taken care of, which means that those network slices that you talked about will actually work across both Wi-Fi and 5G NR, as it's called, the 5G air interface.
Yes.
And they could be deployed also parallel inside an enterprise. So there will be 5G small cells coming out of the size that you can put into the enterprise environment. They're not available yet, but the industry is working on that. As the chipsets and the technology is shrinking, which it always does, as the generations move forward, we'll get smaller and smaller and cheaper because of the scale. And that's how it works.
What's the timeline, do you think, for all of this?
I think, if you look at the timelines, now we will see, first we saw the millimeter wave launches, where people has to go out and look around if they can find connectivity somewhere. Then we will see this nationwide 5G. And as I said, that's our strategy. That's what we're bringing to the market. But still, all of this is connected to the 4G core. So this is very technical. But the core network is still a 4G network, 4G core, which means that the latency benefit will not be there yet. Second half next year, we're all moving over to a standalone core, as it's called, a standalone 5G core. That's when the network slicing can start to happen. Yeah, that's a great thing. And that's when we get these low latencies, which are remarkably low. So we're at about 30 to 40 milliseconds in LTE today, and that will move down to perhaps 5 milliseconds of delay, which is very haptic. So the experience on a 5G phone, even when you will be dramatically better when you touch something, actually happens directly. And that's the whole prerequisites to be able to implement augmented reality, which I think personally is going to be the big thing, when you can start to use image processing in real time and get feedback on the pictures with overlays of whatever it might be.
Sue, any thoughts from you on timeline? I know it's a stages, so there's the first piece, and then down where, the remote robotic surgery. What is that, like 7-8 years, or
Well,
self-driving cars in 2020, but they'll fix your eyes in 2025.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an evolution. As I've listened to John and Ulf speak, it's you can turn a switch, but this is an evolution from 4G to 5G. So the operators are densifying their networks now. The majority of them who are paying attention and densifying now, they're also deploying edge computing, and that is key to all of this discussion around low latency and all of these types of applications that you're talking about, robotic surgery and self-driving cars and all of that. So it's going to take some time. I think we see an uptick in the small cell deployments with edge computing, bringing big value to the 5G IoT business case kind of in the 2023 timeframe. So.
Okay, 2023. And John, when can I watch the Cubs game here and feel like I'm at Wrigley when I'm living here in D.C.? No, in all seriousness, what's your timeline, do you think?
So what happens is it was very nicely described how things are moving. And in service provider, the core network and the cellular wireless very soon will be turned into providing these capabilities with network slices. For enterprises, we've had that capability for a couple of years now. You can buy it as software-defined access. So people can build what we call enterprise network segments, which is the same thing as a network slice within an enterprise already. In terms of the wireless, like Wi-Fi indoors, that was released this year. And some of you already have phones or APs that actually support that. And within the next year, it should be pretty ubiquitous for Wi-Fi 6. So the capabilities are coming here, and they're coming soon. So it's a very exciting time.
John, Ulf, and Sue, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You guys were a terrific panel.